episode 97 of the CRICKETher Weekly. There's only really one thing that everyone's talking about this week, Sid. It's the start of the Women's Ashes! Hooray! Except it's rained for 2 of the matches. Boo. So we've got a 4-2 scoreline to Australia, haven't we, Sid?
Yeah, so I've got a question for you, Raf. If you were Heather Knight, would you have taken 4-2 going into the test, coming out of these 2020s? It's effectively England have won 1 game, Australia have won 2 games.
It's a really good question, isn't it? And I was sort of thinking about that this morning at stupid o'clock here in England when the match was abandoned. And I think from our perspective as fans, we tend to be quite pessimistic about England's chances going into the Ashes lately.
Us pessimistic?
Just purely because Australia have been so dominant in international cricket for the last few years. And so I don't think that that's unreasonable. So I think from a fan perspective, we probably would have taken 4-2 to Australia because, as you say, that would have suggested 1 match going to England and 2 matches going to Australia.
Would Heather Knight have taken that?
Yeah, but would Heather Knight have taken it? Well, I don't think she would have actually. I think that from a kind of international sporting perspective, you have to go into cricket matches thinking that you have the ability to win them. Otherwise, what's the point, first of all? And secondly, I think that England's new kind of aggressive strategy, this whole thing of fighting fire with fire, the whole thing that Heather Knight was talking up before the series, meant that they really knew that they had to get off to a flyer from the word go, from the outset of the series. And so they really were going into the T20 leg thinking we've got to try and win 2-3 of these matches. So I think no, she wouldn't have taken it and will be quite frustrated with what's transpired, to be honest.
Okay, well, apart from the rain, what has transpired?
Well, it's the first T20. We had the first T20, didn't we? And England were actually thumped in the end by 9 wickets. That is quite a big win, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a bit of an odd game in a sense because England put on nearly 170, it was 169 I think.
Yeah.
Australia needed 170, and it was a good batting performance. I mean that was Australia needed their highest ever run chase in order to overhaul that total, and yeah, they did it with ease. But that it's a total that would have won the match against any other team in the world, you'd think. Tammy Beaumont and Danny Wyatt, once they got into their running, they played really well. They scored the kind of rapid, aggressive runs that England wanted. It was just that when it came to facing up to Australia, then, Australia were able to, cruise through that. What would have made the difference? Well,
there were a couple of slower periods with the bat, weren't
yeah,
there?
and this is the key to it, I think, that this is kind of instructive. So we had the first couple of overs, England just were quite watchful, and Tammy and Danny both looked a little bit scratchy, and they were sort of getting into it. They didn't lose their wickets, which is a positive, but they did really look like players that hadn't played cricket for a while. And it only took them a couple of overs. I mean, the first 2 overs went for 3 and 4, and then they got up to sort of 7 off the next one, I think, and then they really got into their running. But unfortunately, those first couple of overs actually did cost England because another 10 runs on the board, if they'd gone at sort of 6 and over rather than 3 and over, and got another, or even 7 or 8, that would have made a big difference in terms of the total Australia were facing. And there was another period later on as well. England lost a couple of wickets, and then again, Amy Jones came in and scored quite slowly. Heather Knight took a few balls to get into her running as well. And you just can't afford against Australia to give them those those kind of chances. So England probably overall kind of wasted about 3 overs, and if they'd scored another 4 or 5 runs and over in those 3 overs, put another 15 on the board, maybe that would have made it a little bit harder for Australia. You just can't give Australia an inch, can you, Raf?
No. I think that's absolutely fair, especially that the last 3 overs at the back end, they really needed to be coming out, and Heather Knight and Amy Jones needed to be hitting it from ball 1. I mean, that's the reason essentially that Elise Perry was dropped from Australia's middle order, was her ability to not do that. So the fact that England then didn't seem able to do that was a little bit worrying.
Yeah, this was very explicitly said, wasn't it? It was said that if Elise Perry had been playing in the very top of the order, they could afford to give her those few balls that she needed. But Matthew Mott was pretty damning in a sense.
Yeah.
He was like, she's not playing at the top of the order now. She's playing in the middle order. At the middle order, you've got to be going at well over 100 from the first ball,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
she's not doing that.
Yeah, I
So,
think it was good for
ruthless
them.
Australia.
I think it was good for them to be honest about it. I think that she's got to be honest with herself about her own game and how she needs to improve in order to get back into the team. It's not just a matter of, well, we've got everyone available for selection, so you've just missed out this time. She actually needs to really work on her T20 game if she's going to get back in that Australia side. Maybe she'll be content to be in the Test and the ODI side for the next few years of her career, because she's 31 now, so she's kind of leading up to retirement gradually. As an all-rounder, so she might be content, but I don't think actually that's very Elise Perry. I think she'll be wanting to get back in there. Anyway, I think that we do need to think about England's bowling though, because we have been a bit critical of the batters, but overall England really lost it with the ball, didn't they, Sid?
Yeah, and so I wrote a piece about bowling. And what I did was went out back and looked at some history. So I went back and looked at over 100 matches played between the top 5 teams. So England, Australia, South Africa, New Zealand,
West Indies,
and no, the other one, India.
Okay.
So I didn't include West Indies because they've been a bit up and down. I wanted to keep it between the very top teams, so you had a really consistent picture of it. And the thing is that while economy rates and not letting the opposition score runs are really important in 2020 cricket, actually the fact is that if you're defending a total, you have to take wickets. Okay, if you can only take 1, 2, 3 wickets, you are never ever going to win a T20 international. Nobody ever wins T20 internationals defending but only taking 3 wickets, let alone the none or the 1.
Okay.
England obviously did take 1.
Took 1, yay!
But that's never going to win you a T20 international. You really need to be taking 4, 5, 6 wickets before, and it's kind of the 6 wickets before you start to get up your odds of being good of winning that game. And England have now this developing problem. We talked about this on the CRICKETher Weekly last summer against India. In the matches against India, we were concerned that England just weren't taking wickets. I mean, they were taking a couple of wickets against India, who are obviously a bit of a weaker side than Australia. No shade on India there. Everyone's weaker than Australia, including definitely England at the moment.
Yeah.
It was masked a little bit in the New Zealand series because New Zealand had a couple of horrendous collapses, and it was easy to look at that and go, oh well, England's bowlers are back to their best. And I'm not sure. I think that New Zealand, are kind of fragile with the bat in a way that England have been at points in the past, and that masked that. But the fact is that England are not taking wickets, and that's the weakness in their bowling attack. They can defend really well, but not able to take wickets.
And I think your piece was really interesting because it highlighted this fallacy that we've got in women's international cricket at the moment, which is everyone's obsessed with bowlers who can defend and who can kind of just bowl it on the ninepence, and they aren't so concerned about wicket-taking bowlers. And actually what your piece is showing is that you really do need to be concerned about that. So look at Australia, for example, selecting Alana King over Amanda Jade Wellington as their leg spinner because they think that she plays more of that defensive role, whereas Amanda Jade takes wickets. And there are equally examples in England where somebody like Sarah Glenn is being picked, even though she's not really getting massive spin on the ball because people think that she's economical. I mean, after the first T20, maybe that's not really particularly accurate anymore because she did really get punished. But I think that was the basis on which she was selected.
Yeah. So what can England do to change this, Raf?
Yeah, well, they've really got to do something about it, and they haven't really got very long to do anything about it in terms of changing up the selections. So the teams are flying to Canberra tomorrow on Monday, and then the test is starting on Thursday. And both sides have really made it quite clear that from the position that they're currently in, they are going to be trying for a win. But I think particularly it was evident in Heather Knight's press conference this morning. She kind of basically said, we're going all out for the win. She said, we came to Australia anyway, hoping for that win or really wanting that win in the test. But now that the scoreline is not in their favour, England, they don't mathematically 100% need to win the test. If they draw the test and then don't lose any of the ODIs, then they can still go on and win the Ashes. But it really would be very difficult, I think, to not lose an ODI against Australia, given the way they're playing in ODI cricket at the moment. So I think England are fairly, a fairly what's the word? They understand that they're not shying away from the fact that they really need to go into this test and be aggressive and win. So let's hope that they do have a bit more of an aggressive strategy with the ball. I've done some extensive analysis though, Sid.
Extensive analysis of your own, Raf.
Extensive analysis.
Okay.
And looked at women's Test cricket since 1934. And what I've found is, and this is actually quite a revelation, just prepare yourself for this revelation, you can't win a women's Test without taking 20 wickets.
Wow.
I know, it's staggering, isn't it?
Mind blown.
Anyway, so yeah, you can't win a women's Test without taking 20 wickets, obviously. And so, yeah, that's a reason why England need to be quite aggressive, because they really do need to win this Test. So what are they going to do? What are they going to do, Sid?
Well, I mean, we talk about, being aggressive going into the Test. Have Australia also, learnt some lessons? Matthew Mott was talking about that they wanted to play Maitland Brown and Tayla Flemick in the Test. That sounds to me like the kind of aggressive strategy that that is actually going to win you this game. Now, Australia have talked a good game about Tests in the recent past. And the last couple of Tests they've played, they've talked a lot about going in it to win it, and then that hasn't been the way they've played.
I'm shaking
but if
my head.
picking two aggressive fast bowlers does look like that maybe they'd learned a lesson, but
I'll believe it when I see it, Sid.
But where are England's wickets going to come from, Raf?
Well, one interesting thing Heather Knight did say this morning is that they're definitely going to pick Kate Cross for the Test. Well, she said that since they arrived in Australia, Kate Cross has been exclusively focusing on red ball cricket. Because obviously one of the challenges for the Test now is that they've only got, 3 days in Canberra to prepare for it. So that's a really short lead-in time. So actually it's a bit of an advantage if you've got somebody like Kate Cross who's been bowling with, for about, what is it now, they've been in Australia 2 or 3 weeks. She's been exclusively bowling with the red ball since
plus
they
the
arrived.
prep time back in Loughborough, so she will have been focused on red ball for a couple of months.
So that's she's pretty certain to play. So that could be useful for England. And I know that you've got some thoughts, Sid, about potential players that they might want to pick from Australia A. I'm afraid I don't think it's going to happen, but do you want to talk about Lauren Bell?
Well, yeah.
Shall we start playing Lauren Bell bingo as well? Ding!
I just think that that's the kind of selection, a bit like your Browns and Vlemicks, that is going to potentially have that more attacking option that's going to take those wickets that you need to do to win the game. Let's bear in mind we've just had some days of rain in Adelaide. The forecast is actually really bad for Canberra. Next week. Now it's a long range forecast.
But Australia, it's their summer. It's meant to be sunny.
Yeah, but I'm afraid the long range forecast is not good. Now the long range forecast obviously may turn out to be very inaccurate. That's the nature of these things. But at the moment it's not looking good. So at the moment it seems as if even having 4 days probably that is not what they're going to get. They might only get 3 days. And if you're going to attempt to win the game off the back of those 3 days, you need that kind of wicket-taking bowling, and you need to be prepared to leak some runs in that case. You need to be prepared for getting some wides and things, and that's inevitable. And of course, it's a Test actually, so that things like leg side wides are actually less of an issue.
Exactly.
So we can talk about Lauren. If you look at Lauren's numbers, she does concede more wides than some other bowlers, but a lot of them are leg side wides when she's trying to swing it in, and at that point, that's not going to apply in the Test. So I think that there is that opportunity there. Are England going to take it? Not in a million years.
I'm sorry, Sid. But it's maybe Heather Knight might watch this. I just had a random thought though. In the press conference today, they again said to Heather, "What do you think about having a 5th day in the Test?" And she said, "Yes, definitely." And she's been very vocal in support of that, and I think Australian players have been as well. Is it too late to add in a 5th day, given the weather forecast and the poor showing of the Australian weather so far in the series? What's stopping them?
I mean, TV schedules and things like that. Ultimately,
well, they can just live stream it.
Not if all the cameramen have gone home because they've.
Oh, that's true. Can you just bung them an extra few quid?
Well.
I'm making it sound really easy.
These things get planned months in advance,
hard?
Unfortunately, and those cameras will literally be booked out to be somewhere else the day afterwards. They'll be booked. The cameras and the operators working them will be booked to cover a BBL game the next day, or an AFL game, or a PFL game,
well,
or
that's rubbish.
any of the other FLs.
Okay. In happier news, there's been a bit of a Beth Mooney miracle. The Mooney miracle, hasn't there? She's had surgery on her jaw, what was it, about 4 or 5 days ago? And this morning she's just casually jogging around the Adelaide Oval in the rain, just going, hey, everything's great. Rachel Haynes said in the press conference, yeah, she's fine, she's been netting, she's been jogging around, and she's not had any pain, and everything's brilliant. Can you express for me, Sid, maybe you could do this in emoji form. Can you express for me how you feel at the prospect of Beth Mooney opening for Australia in the Canberra Test? He's doing the kind of bared teeth emoji, which I think is meant to express what? Anxiety, concern, fear.
I think if you're England, I mean that's a huge boost for Australia to have Beth Mooney back. I think that we said last week when we thought that she was going to be out that it was a big blow for them to lose the best player in the world at the moment, arguably, and to get her back. I mean she's such a soldier, isn't she? Such a fighter, and I guess it's no surprise looking at the things that she's done in the past. That she's fought back from this. She's obviously one tough cookie, and there's something very Australian about that, isn't there? It's like
remember the WBBL game when she was vomiting in between overs and stuff because it was so hot and she had like heat exhaustion or something, and she managed to bat her team to victory. It was incredible. Yeah, so
it's great news for Australia and not great news if you're English, unfortunately. Yeah. But in other news, the other side of the injuries and things, Colin, Australia have had to confirm that Tayla is not only out of the Ashes but out of the World Cup, Raf.
Yeah, serious. It's the fracture to her right foot. It's the same injury essentially that took her out of the T20 World Cup in 2020, and then she was out of cricket totally for 8 or 10 months, which is obviously slightly masked then by the lockdowns and the fact that there wasn't a huge amount of cricket then played after that World Cup, but she did miss the World Cup, which was really gutting for her. And this is going to be another blow for her, isn't it?
Yeah, I feel really sorry for her. I worry that Australia ultimately mismanaged her. I remember talking to people about let's go back to Lauren Bell a minute. I'm talking to people about her, people on the England coaching staff, talking to them about 4 or 5 years ago, and they were saying, don't be too impatient, Sid. It's important that we wait. It's important. Lauren Bell was, I first met her when she was 14 years old, and she was already 6 foot tall. Yeah. But what they emphasised to me was that although she was 6 foot tall and she hasn't grown at all, like height wise, but they were like, her body isn't fully developed, Sid. You can't just put her in the England team and expect her to be bowling all those overs. You'll destroy her body, and you'll create an injury-prone player that will have a very foreshortened career. And you know what? Looking back on it, they were absolutely right. That looking back at the pictures of her when she was 14 compared to the pictures of her now, she's kind of grown into her body and developed, and England have now got a player that's got a complete body and hasn't got horrendously injury-prone actions and things like that. And I just worried that they threw Tayla in too deep, too fast, and that's what's ultimately caused all these issues for her. And it's just such a pity that that to think that it might have ultimately been a long-term management issue. I know that Rachel Haynes said in the press conference that we've tried to manage her over the past year, but I just worry that it was the management of her over the years before that that's ultimately created this situation, which England have managed to avoid with Lauren.
Well, I think too fast is the operative term there, because I think that all of the talk and talking up around Tayla has always been, she's going to bowl quicker than any other bowler in women's cricket, and that's put a lot of pressure on her and a lot of pressure on her body, hasn't it, to bowl just super quickly at the expense of, it seems to be at the expense of being fit, being match fit, because, to then come out and bowl 4 overs in the T20 and then do that damage to your foot. There's something wrong with your action, isn't there? That it's and I do worry that we as the media generally pile pressure on players and on coaching setups, because what we say is, we get really excited whenever there's this new young quick bowler, and we get obsessed with their speed.
Yeah, she's going to be the one that bowls 80 miles an hour.
Yeah, exactly. We get obsessed with their speed at the expense of everything else. I remember Tayla was really talked up in England before the last Women's Ashes here. They were going, oh, she's their secret weapon, or from the Australian perspective, she's our secret weapon. She's going to come out and just blow the English bowlers away because they're never going to have faced anything anywhere near as quick. And she did bowl really quickly in the first match. She was, I think her top speed was like 76 miles per hour. Can't remember what that is in kilometres per hour, but it's quick. So she is achieving that, but if she is then doing that at the expense of a kind of sustainable action and a kind of sustainable way of bowling that allows her to have a career injury free, then there is something really wrong there. And to take up your Lauren Bell example, actually, I think that the way that England have managed her, as I understand it, is that they haven't been exclusively focusing on her speed at the expense of everything else as she's developed. They've been going, oh no, I think when we first saw her, she maybe even bowled a bit quicker than she does now. She used to be tearaway fast for Berkshire, but she was spraying wides all over the place, and now she has refined the way that she bowls. She has a couple of slower balls, I think, at her disposal. She is able to bowl a kind of really, really lethal in-swinging Yorker. And that's what she's able to do. And so what if she's bowling a little bit more slowly? And we really need to get over this obsession and this idea that I think that women are going to bowl as quickly as we see in men's cricket. Fast bowling anyway is a really terrible thing to do to your body if you're a man. But if you're a woman, then the idea that you can bowl as fast as a man, I think, may be a little bit of a biological impossibility, I'm afraid, and something that we really shouldn't be trying to ask women to do.
Putting too much pressure on people, especially at a young age.
Hugely. And so I think that's really unfortunate for Tayla Vlemick, but perhaps she's just been slightly sacrificed at the altar of this ridiculous idea that women need to be bowling quickly in order to make women's cricket exciting. I mean, look at Anya Shrubsole. I don't think she's ever clocked over 70 miles per hour. She's normally in the mid-60s, isn't she? I don't know how quickly she bowled that spell in the World Cup final in 2017. I don't care. She took 6 wickets and she won us the game. Who cares? It was a brilliant display of bowling. So, really, let's get over that and let's move on and let's stop blighting the careers of young bowlers by trying to be obsessed with how fast they're bowling.
Okay, will do, Raf.
Okay, and finally this week there's a little bit of bad news coming out of New Zealand actually. It looks like Omicron has finally they've succumbed to the inevitable and Omicron is now in the community. They're talking at the moment that there's going to be 1,000 cases in the community within the next few weeks, which to us admittedly feels like a very small number of cases, but if you're New Zealand and you've been COVID free for 2 years, it feels like something quite scary. So they've put this thing in place called Red Alert, which basically means that for the foreseeable future, all international cricket matches and domestic cricket matches will be played behind closed doors. So I think that means immediately that India women's tour there those matches will be played behind closed doors, and obviously potentially may have an impact on the World Cup, which is still a few weeks away. But we don't know whether these restrictions will still be in place by then. And I tell you what, Sid, the New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has actually postponed her own wedding.
Surely the rules don't apply to the Prime Minister, Raf. I was talking to Boris the other day and he assured me that the rules don't apply to the Prime Minister themselves.
Apparently, in New Zealand, they do actually apply to the Prime Minister.
Wow. Mind blown for the second time.
Right, that's all from us this week. This time next week, I think we'll be absolutely knackered, having been up for 4 nights for the Women's Ashes test, but we'll see what it brings. Hopefully, it won't bring rain. Bye for now.
Bye.